All right, hello, and welcome. A warm welcome from the International Students and Programs Office, commonly referred to as ISPO, specifically to all of our newly admitted Tritons. Whether you are joining us here in the US or you might be on the other side of the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you may be. My name is Grace Fuller. I serve as the manager of International Student Experience and Engagement here at ISPO, and we're so excited to have you for this session. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. So first, you are in listen-only mode, which means you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. So the primary way that you'll interact with us during today's session is through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom menu bar. Additionally, we're also recording, so you'll be able to refer back to this webinar, where we'll post this webinar recording at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. And finally, we again encourage you to ask your questions to the Q&A feature. We'll have a time dedicated at the end where we'll have an open Q&A, and we'll really try to do our best to go through those questions. But if for any reason we don't get to your question today, we also encourage you to reach out to us through icontact.ucsd.edu. Great, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to be able to introduce to you my colleague, Pauline de Guzman, and I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hello, new Tritons. My name is Pauline de Guzman. Thank you, Grace, for that introduction. I serve as the manager of International Student Services here at ISPO. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. It's so very nice to meet you all. Today's agenda is quite short, but we have a lot to discuss, so we'll jump right in. I want to introduce you all to our office, to the International Students and Programs Office, and what we do here on campus and how we support you during your academic program. We have some advising services, of course, that I want to review with you. When you need to make requests for immigration documents, or any updates to your visa status, we do have a portal for document requests called the iPortal, so we'll go over that briefly. It's very important because this year is very different than many others in understanding what your visa status is, and when ISPO and others refer to maintaining your status or holding valid status. What does that really mean? So we'll talk a bit about that. And then, of course, today we will also go over your immigration documents briefly. Throughout our session, you may see a module that looks like this called What Would You Do? So I do hope that we can engage a bit today and that you can help answer some questions for me. So at the very bottom of your Zoom panel, you should see a raise hand function. When I do ask you to please engage, go ahead and raise your hand if you think that my questions during this module are a yes or a no. All right. So ISPO is here for you. You are joining a very large number of international students here on campus. Currently, as of fall 2020, we have 8,337 international students enrolled. That's about 1/5 or 20% of UC San Diego's total student body. Of those 8,000 students, about 5,242 are undergrad, with our top majors being econ and computer science. And about 3,000, roughly right over 3,000, are graduate students, with our top departments being computer science and finance, which is our Rady School of Management. After students complete their program here in the US, they are eligible or may be eligible for work authorization after they graduate. So we currently have about 2,394, so right under 2,400 students who are here maintaining their F1 or J1 student visas through OPT, STEM OPT, or academic training as alumni. So we serve quite a number of students here on campus with our continuing and also alumni working in the US. Plus our newly admitted students, we serve right under 11,000, so 10,689. So we really look forward to welcoming you to this large group of international students at UC San Diego. We have an excellent team here to help support and welcome you. We have over 20 advisors, administrative support, and student assistants. All of our advisors are generalist, which means you're not assigned to any one particular advisor. You can meet with any ISPO advisor, and all of us should have the ability to be able to point you in the right direction and provide you with the regulatory knowledge that you will need. So there are a couple of ways that our office helps. As you can tell in our name, our international students do rely on our office for not only advising, but also programming. So we'll talk about both of those components a bit. Advising, you can come to our office and you can ask about your immigration status or maybe documents, and we can help answer any of those questions. As you progress through your program, you may want to start asking about working in the US, perhaps on campus or off campus. For our graduate students joining us today, you might have a graduate student research position, a TA-ship, or so forth. And so on-campus employment, you may start earlier in your program, but we do help you understand employment authorization and what you are able to accept while engaged in your program and after your program here at UC San Diego. You may also ask about traveling and re-entering. So we can help you understand what the regulations are traveling domestically and then also internationally. And then of course, as you experience perhaps academic challenges or need help navigating campus, we are also here to help point you in the right direction. Programming. So this is a new phrase and a new word that I know a lot of our students are not familiar with. So for those of you who are not too familiar with programming, it essentially means events or certain types of gatherings, whether it be virtual or perhaps in person, to help you adjust to studying and living in San Diego, help you understand your immigration benefits, introduce you to campus resources available on campus, and also staying engaged while prioritizing your health and safety. ISPO has an amazing team, which you've all met Grace just now, and Grace leads our programming team here on campus and at ISPO. And we really hope that this year you're able to meet and connect with other international students and domestic students as well, regardless of where you are located. So please look forward to programming events. We share those through our weekly newsletters, and also Grace will be sharing some at the end of today's presentation. So stay tuned. There are a few ways to contact our office, and we understand that many students might be joining us from outside of the US at this time during different time zones, and while many of you might also be here on campus or in the US. So just note that you can always visit icontact.ucsd.edu for all of the most current ways to reach an ISPO advisor. You can always send us an email through our contact form or directly to our email. You can also attend drop-in virtual advising. This is our main form of advising for students. This is performed through Zoom, and on icontact.ucsd.edu, it does have the access link to go ahead and sign in and join that waiting room to speak with an advisor. We are, as of September 1st, also open at Student Center B here on campus. So for those of you who are physically on campus this quarter, who have already arrived or are expecting to arrive for the fall 21 term, our office will be open. So please pop in and say hello to our staff. We'd love to meet you. We are open and our hours do vary, so please contact or visit iContact for the most up-to-date hours in person. For those of you who are traveling or may not have access to the other three forms of contact, we do have our main phone line available for you. Many of our students who are traveling, perhaps passing through a port of entry and need to contact ISPO for an emergency for travel purposes, please do feel free to call our phone lines. All right, moving on here. So as you progress through your program, you might want to make some changes to your immigration documents or request some updates to your current immigration documents or apply for new benefits. All of this is done through ISPO's iPortal. And so many of you should be familiar with our iPortal, as you've all perhaps requested your Form I-20 or DS 2019s already to arrive for the fall quarter. That website is very easy to remember. It's iportal.ucsd.edu. You'll log in with your single sign-on, and you'll select the correct request type that you would like to submit to our office for processing. Processing time does vary depending on each request, but that should be outlined on our website as well, along with guidance on how to submit the request and also any required documents for each request. So I want to take some time to really discuss your status with you, because I think this year, many of our new students and many of our continuing students, there's almost this blurred line because fall 20 was a remote year. And even coming this coming term, fall 21, many of you may actually start enrolling in remote courses. And so understanding what it means to be a new student, what it means to be a continuing student, and how it relates to your visa status is very important. So let's look at your Form I-20 or your Form DS 2019 and what it actually means and how we refer to certain terminology that will assist you in understanding your status. So on your Form I-20 or your Form DS 2019, you will see a program start date as well as an expected program end date. And that should be located in the middle of your Form I-20 or mid left of your Form DS 2019. We'll take a look at those documents shortly here. But until that program start date, all right, you are in what is called initial status. So initial status means that you have not yet arrived to the US, you have not begun your program of study, and you have not yet enrolled full time. In addition, being in initial status means that you have not checked in with our office. You have not told our office that you are physically here and that you have started enrollment. So there is a specific request in the iPortal that you can submit upon arrival to the US so that we can actually activate your Form I-20. Once you submit that request, and we'll talk about that shortly, then your status will change from initial to active. This is key. We have a very limited time frame in which you must switch from initial to active in order to avoid your I-20 or your DS 2019 from canceling. So for those of you who perhaps have immigration documents with an older program start date, we might have issued you an updated I-20 with a new program start date, but you might have noticed the CVIS ID number may be different. So because of certain technological limitations, it's really important that students who are physically here on campus, whether you remained here from your undergrad institutions and never left the US to begin your program at UC San Diego, or if you're arriving for the first time, it's important that you submit a certain request in iPortal in order for us to activate your CVIS record. Extremely important. So many of you during your program will follow all the rules and reporting requirements that we'll go over in other sessions during orientation. But if you do not follow all these rules, then you may fall out of status. And so this is not a good thing, of course, to hear. And our students are great. Many students do not fall out of status, but if you do, you can always come speak to an ISPO advisor. We can help you figure out how to get back on track. However, I know that won't happen to many of you. So you'll all maintain active status all the way through your last date of enrollment. Now, once you complete your program of study, and only if you complete your program of study, are you then granted what is called a 60-day grace period for F1 students. For our J1 students, your grace period is a period of 30 days. During your grace period, you need to take action. So by the end of the 60-day grace period, or 30 days for our J1 students, you must have applied for either work authorization, started a new program, or transferred your I-20 to a new school, have departed the US, or changed your status from F1 to a different non-immigrant class. For anyone who does not take any action during these 60 days, your status will automatically complete, meaning you will be in the US without status, in which case you should plan to depart. So this is a really quick, comprehensive look at your timeline here. But as many of you can understand here, many of you might start your program remotely for the fall quarter or have started prior. So you might actually be a continuing student. But in terms of your I-20 or your DS 2019, it might appear as though you have an initial I-20 and are just entering the US for the first time as a brand new student. So there's a lot of confusion that goes around that. Please feel free to ask questions if there's anything we can clarify, but I hope that was helpful for you all to understand your status moving from initial to active. All right. So how do we make sure that your I-20 or your DS 2019 remains in good standing and that you move from initial to active status if you're physically here in the US? So if you visit itravel.ucsd.edu, we do have information about how to check in. In iPortal, you will submit the check-in for I-20 or DS 2019 activation. It's a specific request in iPortal that you need to submit so that we can activate your CVIS record. We will ask you to upload a few documents, such as your I-94, and also verify that your current address is updated in Triton Link. So once you do these two things, we'll go ahead and we'll send you a notification letting you know that your CVIS record has been processed for activation. Now, what happens if you cannot arrive or you're unable to arrive as planned before October 8th? Just so that you're all aware, October 8th is the add deadline for fall 21 coursework, meaning it's the last day to add classes for the fall quarter. Students who are planning to arrive after October 8th should check with your department or your college about being able to arrive this late into the quarter, only because succeeding academically in your coursework in a 10-week quarter, having missed 2 weeks or so is very difficult. And so in order to succeed academically, you do need to talk to your departments or your college regarding late arrival. If you're unable to arrive after, or if you're planning to arrive after October 8th, then we do suggest that you come and you talk to an ISPO advisor about what that might mean for you. But also you might need to update your immigration document. So you can log into iPortal and you can submit the new admit I-20 or DS 2019 amendment reprint requests. And we can also adjust the program start date on your immigration documents. Okay, and of course, make sure that your current address is updated to a foreign address and Triton Link if you are remaining abroad. If you are unable to secure any remote courses to start your program from abroad, if unable to arrive before October 8th, please do speak with your college. If you are an undergraduate student or if you are a graduate student, please discuss your options with your department directly. Okay. So we're going to jump into a quick overview of your immigration documents. And so I'll go ahead and we'll get started with this now. I'm just jump in here. Okay, we have a quick video. I just wanted to see with the raise of hands here, show of hands, what you think about this question. Is this true or false? So let's go ahead and let's watch this quick video.
I think I can throw away past immigration documents like my I-20 and DS 2019 if I get updated ones.
All right, if you have hands, show me if you think that you could throw away old immigration documents. Raise your hand. It is actually false. So for the few of you who raised your hand, please do not discard any immigration documents that you have received either from our office or any other office here in the US. It's really important because you never know in the future when you'll need to find that immigration document and present it for a future immigration benefit or so forth. So please do keep all of your immigration documents, everything that you receive from our office here at UC San Diego, as well as every other school that you've attended in the US. It's really, really important that you keep a nice, safe record. All right. So each time that you enter the US, you want to do what's called a document self-check. All right. Again, here's that reminder, please keep all copies of your Form I-20 or DS 2019. You never know when you'll need them. During COVID-19, during the duration of the emergency, the Student and Exchange Visitor Program has allowed for electronic issuance for F1 students only. So for our J1 students attending today, you will be required to carry hard copy documents. Our front desk is open, so you can always come and pick those up from our office if needed. However, we will need to make sure that we mail you the original documents for use in the future. For our F1 students, electronic issuance will be permitted for the duration of the emergency. And so you will see your electronic documents uploaded in iPortal once you submit a request for any updates or changes to your documents. Okay, it's really important that you keep all of your documents valid and up to date. So every time you get a new document, review it, make sure everything is accurate. If there are any discrepancies on it or you have any questions, come and speak to an advisor. Keep your digital copies accessible. So what I like to do is once I have all my documents ready, I like to take pictures of it just in case I have a really fun trip somewhere and you never know, I lose my backpack and my passport and all of my really important immigration documents are inside. It's always important to take pictures of all of your documents and have a nice digital copy. And then of course, make sure that you check your documents each time that you enter the US. So let's take a look at your documents and let's see what you should pay attention to within each document. All right, so your passport, you're all familiar with what your passport looks like. Each country's passport will look a bit different. And so you'll just need to locate a couple of items on yours to review validity. You should always look at your legal name on your passport. Your Form I-20 here at UC San Diego or your Form DS 2019 will always match your legal name as listed on your passport. Your other identifying fields here, such as gender, date of birth, city, or and so forth, will also be reflected on your Form I-20. And another section that you want to look at is your date of expiration. So international students are required to maintain a valid passport for up to 6 months in the future. So if you can see that your passport will be expiring in the next 6 months, it's a good time for you to go ahead and request a passport renewal. It can take time depending on your embassy or your consulate or where you're located. So start that process early, do not wait. Your passport can be renewed at a US or at your country's embassy or consulate, either inside of the US or outside of the US. So you do not need to depart the US in order to renew your passport. So just note that you should start early. You can renew it here or outside of the US if traveling. Okay. So this one's an important one, your US visa. For those of you who already have your visa, I want you to understand what this document is. We get a very typical question. If my visa is expiring, do I need to leave? Do I need to leave the US? All right, so let's talk about what a visa is and what it means for you in terms of travel. You can think of your F1 or your J1 visa like a key, okay? Now, you only need a key to get inside of your house or inside of your car. Once you're inside of the car or once you're inside of the house, you don't need that key anymore. So your visa is the same way. Once you're outside of the US, if you need to physically enter the US, you need a valid F1 or J1 visa. However, once you're inside of the US, if your F1 visa or if your J1 visa expires, you may remain inside of the US even with an expired F1 or J1 visa, as long as you are maintaining your F1 or J1 status by enrolling full-time, maintaining your immigration documents, and reporting certain information to ISPO, so forth, on a quarterly basis. So it's okay to remain in the US even if you have a expired visa. Some things to note when you're looking at your visa page is, of course, the expiration date, right? So just note that any time that you exit the US, this date must be valid at the time of re-entry. If it is not, you're planning to travel over the summer, but you know your visa's already expired, you're going to need to plan to renew your visa before coming back to the US after your summer vacation. Okay. You can also note, you can also note the number of entries here. M means multiple entries and S means single. And then of course, ensure that your visa type or visa class matches the visa, non-immigrant visa classification that you're seeking entry to the US in, so either F1 or J1. So let's talk about renewal of visas if it expires. Unlike your passport, your visa can only be renewed outside of the US. You cannot obtain a visa, a new visa or a visa renewal from within the US. So it's like a key. Can't find your key inside the house. Most likely you don't have a spare inside the house. But anyway, you do need to be physically outside of the US, visit a US embassy or consulate and apply for an F1 or J1 visa from outside of the US in order to renew your visa. Okay. All right, so this is our first what would you do question. So please go ahead and raise your hand if you think yes to this question. You're inside of the US and notice that your F1 visa is expiring in 2 months, which is in the middle of the fall quarter. Can you remain in the US legally? Raise your hand if you think it's okay to stay in the US with an expired passport as long as you're maintaining your F1 or J1 visa. I see a lot of hands going up. 80s, 90s, 100, very good. So yes, you're all correct. You all understand this. You can remain in the US even if you have an expired visa as long as you're maintaining your status. Great, thank you. All right. Okay, so your immigration documents, let's go over this for F1 students and then we'll take a look at the DS 2019 for J1 shortly. On your Form I-20, I know that there's a lot of information on here. You don't need to necessarily know what each line means, but there are a couple that you do need to pay attention to and make sure are updated at all times. In the middle of your program, you will see under program of study, your program start date and end date. Okay, what's really important here is your end date. So your start date might move while you're in initial status, right? We're going to keep adjusting that start date to a future quarter until you physically enter the US, report you're here, and then we can activate your I-20. Once we activate your I-20, your program start date will freeze. It'll stay as is because you've told us that as of that date, you've entered the US, you've began your program of study. However, your end date can fluctuate. And of course, just like your program goals and objectives within your academic colleges and departments, you might need more time to complete your program of study. You might also need less time. So this program end date is flexible. We can go ahead and we can shorten it. If you finish early, we can also extend it. Now, the main thing that students need to remember is with this program end date, you must extend it before the current program end date listed. Okay, so if this says June 30th of 2025, then you need to make sure that by that date that you do extend it if you need more time. There are also other fields under program of study, such as your program level, so bachelor, master's, doctorate. Also check your major, check your biographical information on there, make sure your name's spelled correctly, we have your date of birth correctly listed and so forth. And then your travel signature. So we'll take a look at the second page of your I-20 here. But just so that you can all view your I-20, if you have it in front of you, you want to take a look at it. This section here under school attestation, I will usually, or an advisor here will usually sign. And then under student attestation, you will want to sign as well. Make sure that both signatures are present in order for use. Another thing I want to point out, since a lot of students had questions about this major, is that we use what's called zip codes for your major. So sometimes your major might say Master of Finance, for example, but then your major might say something like financial mathematics, something a bit different. So just note that your majors are actually correctly listed within your department. It just might not match the exact word or major listed here at UC San Diego from what is listed on your I-20. So just know that that's okay. We have assured that your major is correctly listed. And again, if you need to make any changes to your immigration documents, you're going to need to do that through the iPortal. So on the second page of your Form I-20, you'll see what's called a travel endorsement section. So in this section here, you want to make sure that you have a valid travel signature. You will need this each time you re-enter the US. Okay, in order to re-enter the US, you need a valid passport, a valid visa, and also a valid I-20 with a valid travel signature. So this travel signature here will always be valid for 1 date or 1 year from the date of signing. So you can see here that some advisors signed this on August 10th, 2021, which means that they can use this I-20 to enter the US all the way through August 10th of 2021. I'm sorry, that's a full year. And so if the student was using this particular I-20 to enter the US right now, this would actually be an expired travel signature. So they would need to log into iPortal, request for a new travel signature, and then our office will go ahead and issue a new updated I-20 with a new signature on the second page. Okay. All right. So here's our next, what would you do? And we didn't talk about this too heavily, but I do want to see what you all think about this, and so that we can discuss it if needed. The expected program end date listed on your Form I-20 is June 30th of 2022. Okay? You realize you're actually completing your program early in December of 2021. Okay, you're completing 6 months early. Does this mean you can maintain your status, hang out and travel, and stay in the US without any enrollment until June 30th of 2022? Okay, I see a few hands raised, which is not too bad. So the answer here is no, your hand should all be down. If your program ends early, okay, then you should expect that your program end date on your I-20 also, even if it's not listed there, will also be adjusted accordingly. So if we give you until June 30th of 2022, again, this is an expected program end date. If you finish earlier, then your grace period will begin on your last date of enrollment. So on, let's say, December of 2021, your grace period will begin, and you will need to take action within 60 days if you're an F1 student, or 30 days of your last date of enrollment. So it's really important to know you can't just hang out because you have more time on your I-20. Once you stop enrolling, then you're essentially done with your program. You need to take action to maintain your status here in the US. All right, that was great. Thank you. Okay, for our J1 students, quite similar. For your Form DS 2019, you will see your program dates. I'm sorry, this is not the best image to show you all, but under your form covers period, you'll see your program dates there, and then your travel signature is actually on your first page, and you'll see it at the bottom right-hand corner. Okay. Same concepts, extend your program end date before your program ends, check your program level, major, biographical information, make sure that you have a travel signature. Any changes that occur on your Form I-20 or DS 2019 need to be submitted within 10 days to ISPO through the iPortal. Okay, so for those of you who might have a spouse or a child who is here with you, you might have brought them with you on an F2 visa or a J2 visa. So just note that their documents will look very similar to yours as well, but they will have a unique SEVIS ID number and also SEVIS I-20. So please ensure that if you do have a dependent who is physically here with you, that you also take a look at their immigration documents and keep those up to date as well. All right, so let's take a look at your next document, which is your Form I-94, which is also known as your arrival or departure record. So each time that you enter the US, you will receive what's called an electronic Form I-94. Okay. Now, this tells an individual here in the US that you are physically located in the US, the last date that you entered, the status that you entered on, and also which passport number you used to enter. So this is actually a document that you will need to generate in order to submit your check-in form to ISPO and in order for us to activate your Form I-20. This is the proof that you physically entered the US. So it's really important that you generate this document as soon as you arrive. Visit i94.cbp.dhs.gov and it'll bring you to a website to generate your most recent I-94. Again, you'll generate one every time you enter the US, so you'll likely have multiple ones of these. You'll input your passport information as requested. So your first name, last name, date of birth, month, year, and also passport number. And it'll always match the passport that you use to enter the US. And then once you do so, you will receive a PDF of your most recent I-94. You want to double check that on your most recent I-94, the class of admission is correct. So F1 or J1. And that the admit until date states D/S for duration of status. Okay, admit until date means that how long are you permitted to remain in the US under that class of admission. So for our F1 or our J1 students, you should not have a date listed there. Otherwise, you need to leave by that date listed. So if there is a date listed there, come and talk to an ISPO advisor after. There's likely an error on your Form I-94, and we can help you to correct that. However, it should state D/S for duration of status, meaning as long as you are in the US maintaining your Form I-20, Form DS 2019, following all the rules for your F1 and your J1 status, you are permitted to remain here as long as you are doing all of those things. And also make sure that your last name and your first name and all of your biographical information are also up to date and correct. Okay. All right, our last one here, we are almost to the end. Please make sure that you update your address. This is sometimes overlooked by students, but it is a regulation that you must update your address within 10 days of any change. So if you are physically here on campus, your address in Triton Link should link to your on-campus address. However, once you move off campus, maybe find an apartment with some friends, make sure that you log into Triton Link, update that local address as well as your foreign address if it's changed in your home country, also known as your permanent address, within 10 days. For any emergencies, we want to make sure that we do have an emergency contact to reach you. So please also fill out your emergency contact. This is all done through Triton Link, and you can update this at tritonlink.ucsd.edu. All right. Okay, so that was quite a long time of me talking about your immigration documents. I hope you all found that helpful. So I'll turn it over to Grace here to go over some other updates, or we can take some questions.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump into some questions, and then we can reserve the last couple minutes to go over some final reminders.
Wonderful. All right.
We have a lot of good questions that have come through. And the first one, I think, is a common question, so I'll go ahead and read it out loud to you, Holly. Okay. So the student reads, at immigration, I was told to request the I-20 original form from the university, and currently I have the electronic copy. Do I need to do so?
So for the duration of the emergency, you are permitted to use electronic copies. And so what this means is an ISPO advisor here will generate an original document for you. We will electronically sign it and then upload it for you to use. You will need to then physically print the document and then sign it as well and hold a hard copy while you're passing through the port of entry. So it would not be acceptable for you to show your phone to the port of entry officer. For our F1 students, the Student in Exchange Visitor Program has permitted the use of electronically issued documents from your institution during the remainder of the emergency. However, if you are a J1 student, you are required to obtain a hard copy from our office. That can also be done through iPortal. Great question, Grace. Do you have another?
Yes, I do. So our next question reads, do I need to be physically present at the university before I submit my check-in form, or should I submit the request as soon as I arrive to the US?
That's a great question. Thank you for that question. So you should submit it as soon as you physically arrive to the US. The assumption is that once you're physically here in the US, you will eventually make your way to UC San Diego and enroll in in-person classes, because the expectation is that you have at least one in-person or hybrid course in order to seek entry into the US this fall quarter. So as soon as you do enter the US and you generate that form I-94, you can go ahead and submit the check-in for activation. You do not need to wait until you're physically on site on campus. But we do expect that many of our students will submit it, will arrive shortly to the campus after arrival to the US. So.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Pauline. All right, you might have gone over this in your presentation, but just for reiteration's sake. So for students living on campus, should they put their mailing address listed on the housing portal as their new current address?
Oh. That is a good question. Do we put the mailing address listed on the housing portal as our new current address? I might need to, Grace, we might need to clarify that question and just make sure that with housing, that is the correct thing to do. So to my understanding, if you are living on campus, Triton Link should automatically update with your on-campus housing arrangement. So if you do need to change it because it is incorrect, or you would like for it to be a different address for mailing, let's go ahead and let's reserve that question, Grace, and see if we can get back to students about that specifically. We'll go ahead and we'll check and we'll get an answer back to you. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Pauline, if there's a question that picked up.
Okay, there's another one here kind of on the topic of hard copy I-20s. Do I need to obtain a hard copy of my I-20 from ISPO after reaching the US? No, you do not. So your I-20, your electronically issued one, will go ahead and be valid for use. If you need to make any changes to your I-20, of course, we'll issue you an updated one. Then you'll use that new document as your new updated I-20. But no, you do not need a hard copy from ISPO. But again, just remember that whenever we do issue you an electronic copy, you want to print it out and sign it. And that's what you want to use whenever presenting it to anyone. Okay. Okay, I have another question. I'm a deferred student. I have discarded the I-20 that I received from last year. Is that okay? Yes, that's fine. If you have the I-20 and you requested it last year, it might have been during our electronic issuance period. And so you might still have access to it in iPortal. But even if you discarded the physical copy, that's fine as a deferred student. Just make sure that once you physically enter the US and you have an I-20 that we activate, that you keep that copy. Okay, this is a good one. Do I have to carry my passport every time I go out, or my I-94 document is enough? So technically here in the US, your main form of identification is your passport. However, we know if you're adventurous like Grace is, you might go scuba diving, or you might want to go exploring San Diego. It is perfectly fine to leave your passport at home or in a safe place. Please do make sure that you have digital copies again of your Form I-94 passport, I-20, so that I know that none of you leave your phone at home. So just make sure that you have that phone with those digital copies if you want to make sure that they're safe and that you don't lose them. Okay. However, for domestic travel, international travel, I do highly recommend that you always have all of your immigration documents on hand, of course, in a safe place, but with you. Okay. Okay. All right, for our Canadian citizens, you do not need an F1 or a J1 visa, so you should just show your passport, your Form I-20, proof of financial capability at the port of entry when seeking entry to the US, and you should be permitted to the US without needing to apply for a US visa at a US embassy or consulate. If your passport expires, do you have to go through the interview process again? So your passport is a bit different than your visa. Your passport is kind of like your ID almost. It's your form of identification from your issuing home country government. And so you don't usually need to go through any type of interview to renew your passport, but you might need to submit your actual passport physically back to the US Embassy for them to process a new one for you. They may ask you some additional questions, but it's not in a form of an interview. It might be more document collecting, but you do not need to go through any type of rigorous process to renew your passport, hopefully. Do I need to change the school name in the visa after transferring to UCSD? This is a very good question. So if for our transfer students, and I mean this by CVIS transfer, you probably attended a different institution here in the US and you're now attending UC San Diego, and the gap between your last date of enrollment or last date of OPT at your last school and the start of your program here at UCSD is likely less than 5 months. If that is the case, then your school listed on your current valid visa might state your previous school, your undergraduate school. And as long as that visa is valid and as long as that CVIS number remains the same, it is okay to attend UC San Diego without needing to change the name on that visa. It's very common for students who are transferring to transfer their CVIS record to their new school because that CVIS number will actually remain the same. Okay. Okay, another one. We have quite a few questions here, Grace, so I might need your help in grouping some of them. Let me see. Okay, so for questions about SSN or any work authorization, we do have another session regarding employment as an undergraduate or a graduate student here in the US. So please do attend those. We go over social security numbers and all of that fun stuff there. Okay. For any changes to your Form I-20, so what is the process with my I-20 if I change my major? Any changes to your I-20 can be done through iPortal. So in iPortal, you're going to see a request type called Updated I-20 Request, and that will include changes to your major, changes to certain fields on your Form I-20. So you'll submit that request within a certain number of processing days. We'll go ahead and we'll update you with a new I-20. Okay.
I see quite a few questions about like renewing their I-94 or generating it. And just to clarify, and Pauline, correct me if I'm wrong, the I-94 will be automatically generated for you if you're entering through an airport or a seaport. So you don't have to worry about generating it yourself or renewing it, but it is important to make sure that the information listed there is correct. And so please refer to, I've answered some of those questions in the type feature, and I've pointed you to our I-94 website. So that's a great place to just kind of make sure and use it as a checklist.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Grace. So yes, your I-94, basically, when you pass through a port of entry, the officer there will take your passport, log your information into a system, and that information will then generate for you your electronic Form I-94. It is not automatically generated, so you still do need to visit i94.cbp.gov and then make sure that you generate the actual PDF and print it out and so forth, but it should all physically be in the system, just waiting for you to retrieve it via PDF. So yeah, as Grace has provided, visit that website and it should troubleshoot any access questions for your Form I-94, as well as what to do if you find that there is incorrect information listed on your I-94. Okay. Do I need an I-94 each time I enter and leave the US? I mean, when I leave the US, they also issue an I-94. So the I-94 is actually an arrival and departure record. So you only need to generate an I-94 each time you enter, because that shows what status you entered in and that you're maintaining your status in that current non-immigrant classification, so F1 or J1. However, every time you depart the US, There's also a second tab within your Form I-94 that will show your travel history. This shows every time you entered the US or exited the US, either through land or sea ports. And so you don't need to print out anytime your I-20 and your travel history, your I-94 and your travel history every time you leave. You only need to generate it every time you enter the US.
Colleen, there are a couple questions here regarding students who might be staying at a hotel for the first couple weeks when they arrive, or maybe another city in the US other than San Diego for the first couple weeks, and asking if they should update that as their current address, and then again, after they move on to campus, let's say. What would you tell them?
Ooh, this one's a little tough because a hotel usually is not a permanent address. And so we usually don't recommend that you make changes to Triton Link for temporary addresses. So for hotels, I would say, because you're likely not going to stay there for a long period of time, do not update your Triton Link address as your current address with the hotel. Wait to see until you can settle into a permanent resident to update that address. Okay, these are great questions. Thank you all for engaging and submitting such thoughtful questions here. I see a few questions about certain areas of the Form I-20 being blank. I just note that if there is no value in a field on your Form I-20 or DS 2019, it means it's not required. So don't worry if it's missing. It just means it's not required, so we're not obligated to report it. Okay, a question about activation. A few questions about activation here. So you submitted your Form I-94 to be activated on the 27th of August. However, the due date was on September 3rd, and it looks like it has not yet been activated. When will it be activated? We do need to wait until a certain period to activate your CVIS record. So it's really important that you go ahead and you submit those requests. iPortal will go ahead and send you a notification once your I-20 has been activated. But unless there is something incorrect on your CVIS record, you will get a contact or a call or an email directly from one of our advisors for follow-up. But for now, thank you all for your patience. Just in case your check-ins are processed a bit later, we do need to wait for a couple of things to move forward first before we can take action on your records. But it should be processed as long as you've submitted it.
I'm seeing a few questions here about needing a negative COVID test or quarantining upon arrival. And so in general, I want to highlight a resource called returntolearn.ucsd.edu. This is a really helpful website that kind of outlines UC San Diego's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as what's required of you as students. In terms of the specific question of do we need a negative COVID test upon US entry, that might depend on your travel. So I know that some airlines are requiring a negative COVID test in order to take that flight. As far as coming to UC San Diego and campus, students will be required to test upon arrival, but they don't need to demonstrate a negative COVID test in order to get on campus. Many of our students are being referred to our vending machines as a COVID testing option. So you can actually go to a vending machine, get your COVID test, and then do the drop-off point. Then again, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. Returntolearn.ucsd.edu is a great website that speaks to a lot of different questions regarding COVID-19 testing, vaccinations, quarantine, etc.
Lots and lots of questions, huh, Grace? I'm trying to sort through which ones are
Yes.
grouped together.
And as you do so, I would just like to, we are doing our best to answer as many questions as we can, but I do want to highlight two things. So if for some reason that we don't get to your question today, I do encourage you to reach out to our office, especially if it's like case specific, I would say, via icontact.ucsd.edu. That is the link that's posted on the screen right there. We have our advisors checking that every day and basically triaging it so that our advisors can get you the answer as soon as possible. And then I will say that for some of these questions, I would encourage you to check out the other sessions that we're offering during this time, during orientation. So for example, for a lot of the employment questions, maybe questions about OPT, CPT, SSNs, we do have some employment sessions that are coming up. For questions about COVID and about testing and vaccinations and quarantine, we have a session that's called COVID-19 Update. And we're partnering with our colleagues from Student Health Services to host that webinar. So I would definitely encourage folks that we might have some sessions actually really dedicated and doing more of a deep dive into the question that you've submitted through the Q&A feature. And again, if we haven't reached your question during this session, go to iContact, and that will both refer you to our Zoom advising, where you can chat with an advisor, as well as submitting it the form, and then we can kind of go through that as we're answering our emails and our form. Pauline, any last few questions that you would like to answer during our last couple of minutes here?
I think these are all great questions. I do want to reiterate what Grace said. Please do come to either our office, send us an email. Our website has great information about all of these questions you were asking. Another good website to highlight is our iTravel website, depending on where you currently are now. I'll add that in the chat there. It has, let's see. It has information about how to renew your travel signature, traveling domestically and internationally, and what documents to carry with you. I know many of you are currently in transit or traveling now, and so please do look at that website as well. But Grace, I think we're ready to go ahead and close it out.
All right, wonderful. All right, so a few final reminders as we end our session together here today. So I highly recommend you to check out our meetups. So I think that orientation is such an exciting time of year, one, for you to understand some of the regulatory information and how to maintain your status while you're here in the US, but also for you to meet new people, for you to make friends, to kind of find your community here at UC San Diego. So in order to do that, we have meetups. So you can see there's two types of meetups. So one, we're hosting regional meetups. So for an opportunity for you to meet students from maybe your same home region, as well as interest meetups as an opportunity for you to meet other students with like-minded interests. So if you go to the website listed on the screen, iorientationucsd.com/meetup, we have all of our meetups listed there as a way for you to find your Triton community here at UC San Diego. And then additionally, the last resource I really want to highlight for our students that is really relevant now during orientation, as well as actually throughout the academic year, is our iEvents calendar. So our iEvents calendar congregates all of the social events that are happening on campus, particularly that might have like a global engagement focus. So I know a lot of students will actually bookmark this tab, and when they're wondering like, what is there to do? What's happening on campus? They'll actually go to iEvents to kind of see what's happening as a way to maybe make their weekend plans or find ways to meet new students, new friends. And so we highly recommend you to check out our iEvents calendar for things to do. All right, and then lastly, some final reminders as we close. So like I mentioned, if you go to our iOrientation website, you can see what other sessions are being offered during international orientation. Again, the requirement is registering for 2 sessions. So one know the rules session and one session of your choice. But many of our students will actually register for multiple sessions because they find the sessions really useful for them as they're transitioning to their life here at UC San Diego. I also want to highlight that at the end of the session, you will receive a survey, and the survey verifies your attendance here and is mandatory for that completion. So for meeting that 2-session requirement. So please do definitely make sure to complete the survey, because that's how we'll verify your attendance and you fulfilling the requirement. And then finally, here are just some useful links and newsletters and websites that we find a lot of our students find useful. So iUpdates.ucsd.edu, we try our best to keep that with the most up-to-date information. So if there's any like breaking news or really commonly asked questions or new developments, we post it there. In addition, you also should be getting our weekly newsletter. And so that is honestly chock full of a lot of those updates, really good information, things to know what's happening on campus. So we find that when students really read through that newsletter, it answers a lot of their questions. Like I mentioned, you can attend our Zoom advising hours, and you can find those hours as well as the link to sign in via icontact.ucsd.edu. And then finally, we hope that you'll follow us on social media. It's a really fun way that we engage with our international student community. All of our handles are at ispo.ucsd, and we are supposed to be doing some giveaways during this time of year. So follow, make sure to keep posted with us, and maybe for an opportunity to win some fun prizes. All right, so that is all of the time that we have today. It is 10 o'clock, and so I just want to thank so much Pauline for being such a wonderful presenter, so comprehensive with all of that knowledge, and thank all of you and give you a really warm welcome to UC San Diego. We are thrilled to have you as a part of the Triton community.